No, there's been a lot of overt, I suppose the word would be radicalism on my part in terms of realizing how much we have this horrible situation going on in Gaza at the moment. And I think for a lot of people, that has been an eye-opener as to how geopolitics works, how their governments are very good at telling us what it is that we want to hear, and yet still funding what I believe is an ongoing genocide. And very much so, it's hard to deny that. And so we creating this EP have an opportunity to talk about that via the question that people will ask. That I'm glad that you did. It's like, so why are you trying to get away? It's like, well, the geopolitics is not particularly great. So
Okay, well, no, yeah, that makes more sense because, you know, when you speak to people about, you know, wanting to escape reality or whatever, there's so many, there could be so many versions of that, or well, so many reasons to be fair, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be one, I guess. And I also wanted to know your, like, what was your opinion? Well, not opinion because it's your project, but comparing this EP to your last one, The Gods Hate Colossus, how how do you think the creative process has been in comparison to that one? Do you think there's been any similarities? Has it been like a follow-up or is it a completely different project?
I have, as you know, tons to say, but I think at this point it's time to wait the interview towards the Robster. Rob, what are your?
Just gonna say it was a lot faster.
A lot faster.
It was a lot faster. It was a much. It was it was originally going to be a single, and then we went, "Hey, what if we put two tracks together, and then we could release two tracks?" And then we were like, "You know what? We've got another month or two. I'm sure we could turn this into a 5-track EP." So it all came together. It all came together very quickly with this, which I think often when it comes to creative things is a really good thing, rather than spending too long kind of like over picking things apart and overthinking things. You leave things to be kind of like organic, and I feel like that was definitely the process with this, where we're having to make quick decisions based on instinct rather than kind of like overanalyzing things. So that would be a thing that I would say is that it was a fairly breakneck process, which was highly enjoyable. Whereas The Gods Hate Colossus was I mean, technically it took like 12 years. So, I mean, it didn't in reality, but it was, but you know, that was when we started recording it to when it, you know, when it was finally released. And most of that time obviously was a gap, but even in, you know, I think we mentioned it in our last interview, you know, it was over lockdown that we started thinking maybe we would want to go back into this whole thing. And so we were listening to the recordings and we started thinking and finding a producer. And, you know, there wasn't an urgency to, I mean, there was an urgency because we wanted to get it done. But since releasing that EP, sorry, I'm tangenting here, but basically, like, upon releasing it, we had, you know, an influx of requests for us to do some live events. And to be honest, that wasn't specifically something that John and I had even really considered properly going back into. Our thinking was, we've got a lot of recorded material and we want to get it out into the world rather than it just sitting in our collection. And so, okay, you know, let's put it out there. And then, like I said, we had, you know, people saying, "Oh, would you like to do this date? Would you like to do that date? We'd love to see, you know, more of this live." And we were like, "Oh, okay." So the last year or so has been yeah, fairly chaotic and busy. Again, in a really, 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 really good way. I can't remember how many shows we did last year, but it was, I mean, it was mental. Like every gig we did was with a slightly different lineup and had a slightly different set list. And most of the gigs we would only, the musicians playing with us would only get like one, maybe two rehearsals. So it was frantic. I think we played with, was it like 17 different musicians last year or something, John? It was like,
That's a good bet. That's a good bet.
yeah,
I
it
don't want to
it
actually
was
remember it. It'll burn my
really,
brain.
really fun. Really fun, but like super intense. And why I bring that in is because whereas before there was nothing, it was like no one was waiting for this thing. Like the you know the the two people in the world excited for this were us. Whereas now now it's a little bit different because you know we've done a bunch of shows and you know I feel like the response we've had has been pretty cool. Like people seem to really enjoy what we're doing. And so now suddenly there's like, it's like, okay, if we're going to put something out, it's not so much that there's like, oh, there's external pressure because like, I don't want to get outside of anything, but it's more just like we're doing all of these things already, and now we're also doing an EP, and we wanting to do two we want to put out two records this year. So it's like get it in amongst everything else that's happening. And so yeah. So yeah,
Was
it
there?
just resulted in it being really fun.
That's always good. But you said that you're gonna, because you want to get two records out this year, at the end of the year, which is an EP. But was there no kind of question about whether to maybe join both of these to make it a full album, or why did you decide to like separate it?
Shall I say stuff?
Yeah,
Okay,
go for it, John.
say stuff. All right. I think that the just on the last question about comparing this EP and the last one, I feel like a bit of an alien sometimes because I'm trying not to do that. I think it's quite healthy to think, okay, that is one child, this is another child, you know? But you can't help but do that because your question comes from many different say critique analysis pools of thinking. Think, well, what you did last time is something to build on or in some way to better. And so we would find ourselves talking about how to make this one better. For me, it would be about loudness. It would also be about various different voices that I used to use working together on one EP. So the order was something that had to be worked out. And there are other criteria, but yeah, because I was definitely experimenting my voice quite a lot there. This next question, would we benefit by putting them both together as an album, or why didn't we? You only get to do your first album once, and so I guess we're kind of saving that, even though we're kind of torn. So again, behind the Oz curtain, if you do an album and it's your first album, then that's it. So depending on how much money's behind it, how much people actually warrant it, that's a whole other thing. And I think right now, because we're a very, very tiny band of a huge name, I think the length of the EP, from what I can tell from the feedback that I've got messenger-wise, it hits home that much better. And I wasn't surprised with the fact that people liked the songs, for my sakes. I'm really proud of them. But I was surprised that people have gotten back to us so soon. I think the God Take Colossus, even though it's 7 tracks in this day and age, because we're a very tiny band, that's a lot to ask for in terms of time. So an album has to be warranted. I don't think we're warranted in that realm just yet.